everybody. Thank you for coming this evening. I know we have several more folks joining online via Zoom. For those who may not know me, my name is Nick. I'm the Assistant Township Manager here in Middletown Township, and also have been the staff liaison helping shepherd our multimodal improvement plan forward. Tonight we have our third and final public meeting for the multimodal improvement plan. And our team from Simone Collins, as well as their assistants from TMA Bucks, as well as Dawood Engineering, are here tonight to share what they've been working all year on and taking in all of the feedback from the community and here really to get everyone's feedback and kind of open the public review period. And so with us tonight from Simone Collins is Principal Bill Collins. We have Anita Nardone and Jeff Creary. And joining from TMA Bucks is Executive Director Steve Knoll, and I believe we have Lori Ware from Dawood Engineering online on the call. And so Simone Collins is going to be the one doing the presentation tonight. I'm here to help facilitate and answer any township questions, but I will turn over to Bill.
Thanks. Good evening, and thank you for coming. We've had great input from the public so far, and I'm just going to turn it right over to our team to go over the technical information, and then we'll open it up to questions and comments after that. So, Anita?
I'd like to stand. Good evening. Thank you so much for hosting us. It has been not quite a year. I guess we started in February. My name is Anita Nardone. I'm the project manager for this project for the township. The Multimodal Improvement Plan was a grant that was awarded to the township to pay for this really important first step, to set a baseline and to set the planning in motion for something that is very important to its residents. So Simone Collins and TMA Bucks and Dawood are really happy to be part of that, and we really hope that it is a fruitful exercise. We come now, like I said, 7 months into it, and now I feel like, Jeff, this is when we really start to know the township. We sort of have to pretend like we're experts at the beginning, but it's you folks that really tell us so much about the township, and as we drive around and start to put the pieces together. So tonight, as Nick said, we have the draft final improvements plan. And we are going to take you through that, take you through the summary of how we got there, what the scope of this is, and what we really are hoping to accomplish. So we're going to try to do it fairly quickly. And I don't mean to do it to dismiss any comments you may have along the way, but I really want to leave as much time as possible so you can comment, ask us very specific questions about the information. So with that being said, if I could have the first slide, Nick, for the agenda tonight. There we go. We're going to go over what the actual scope of this project is. There's so much in Middletown that affects connectivity, but I want to be clear about what we're hoping to accomplish with this plan. We want to summarize everything that you've told us as best we can and present it in a way that people understand how we got the direction to go where we did. We want to show you, at least on the screen, but here we also have the plan printed for people to gather around afterwards. We had a great time doing that at our May meeting, and I hope that continues again tonight. For all of you who are online, tomorrow this plan will be posted as well as the presentation so you can understand where we came from. Then we will talk about two important, I call them advanced investigation, and basically what we did was to find an area of the township that we felt rose to the top as far as people's interest and priority and the number of mentions during the conversations and the public opinion survey. And they were the Woodbourne Corridor and Business Route 1. Lori Ware will help us with that too. But we're spending a little bit of extra time on those two corridors. We want to show you the kinds of things that we're talking about. Lastly, the good news and the bad news, right? What this all could cost, right? To kind of prepare us for how we're going to move forward practically. Again, and leaving the rest for discussion. Questions from you folks. Next slide, please. Great. We can keep right on going, Nick. Thank you. These were the scope items for this project. And the multimodal improvement plan is indeed a plan of the township with a full report to understand why we did that, along with cost estimates and recommendations for priorities and funding. To do that, we had to, of course, do site reconnaissance, driving through that township, getting to know it from a physical point of view as well as from a Google point of view. We took all of that information and synthesized how best, we felt connectivity could occur for bikes and pedestrians. They are definitely the primary focus of this plan. Number 4 was the largest effort, really, to understand, like I said, the township, the public opinion survey, the chance to draw on a map and say, this is where I want to get to, but really to understand where you want to go, what are your barriers in getting there, and what do you use it for? What are the ages? Where are the schools? Where are the commercial activities that people want to get to? So that public participation is also informed by talking to 9 key stakeholders, your surrounding neighbors, the major employers, Wood Services, Sesame Place, the people at Oxford Valley Mall, all of those important people getting their input as well. The plan report and costs and funding strategy. And the reason I say what this project is and what it isn't is that certainly connectivity is related to so many other issues of traffic and development and all those kinds of things. But this study really is talking about what's the plan for getting people safely on a bike or on their feet to places that they want to get to without a car. And that's really what this plan is all about. The next slide. Our schedule, here we are, circled in red, is our 3rd public meeting at the end of September. After this, we will finalize the full report. The plan is pretty much done. Again, everything that we hear tonight, of course, will be investigated and added, but then there'll be a 30-day review period of the plan and the report together. We'll make a presentation to the Planning Commission and to the Board of Supervisors, again, incorporate anything that they'd like to see, and publish this by the end of the year, beginning of January, which is actually a great timing. All the grant cycles begin starting in March of the following year. So the township has a chance to kind of digest this and really look at the information that we've provided and decide how they want to go forward. Next one. All right, the summary of the public input. I wanted to tell you about our meeting in May. Betty Ann was here. Just kind of highlight what the typical format was. Just like we're doing now, we certainly had a presentation, but we all gathered around the map with red magic markers, which is so helpful to Jeff and Bill and I to sort of take that map back and then re-look at things again. But if you look at the discussion points, I brought this up because aside from the connectivity, you can kind of see a lot of great other ideas related to connectivity that the public is concerned about. And I think this also becomes an element of what we will incorporate into our report. People are interested in, signage and traffic marking and educating people about what those symbols might mean or how you can better educate yourself as a walker about what those signs are. People are brought up great points about that weren't specifically the lines on the map. So I just sort of listed those for public meeting too. Next slide. The public opinion survey is now closed. So we closed that on September 15th, and we had a total of 287 responses. And that graph that you see is sort of kind of gives you an idea of when people sort of responded. We had a great mailing in August, and in a period of about 2 weeks, we had over 100 responses. So people really did respond to the effort that the township put out to respond to the survey. We're going to give you a couple highlights. The next slide, please, Nick. We, of course, it's no surprise that you sort of have 3/4 of the people in the 12 to 64-year range, but that's a change from May. In May, we didn't have anybody under the age of 18, so we actually had, I think, a half or 3/4 of a percentage point of people under the age of 18, and that actually does make me very happy. Over 65, of course, so that is our breakdown. But look, interestingly, I find the length of residency. Many times in the plans that we worked on for other townships, you have people who have lived there a really long time that are most interested. But look at that really interesting equal breakdown of people who've lived there 0 to 5, 6 to 10. It's almost an even split. So what I'm getting at here is this issue of multimodal ped bike accessibility is so strong that whether you've lived here, 30 years or you've just moved here, people are looking for it. It's an important thing. The level of discomfort for walking and biking hasn't really changed from when the first 100 responses came. Uncomfortable or very uncomfortable is the majority of the people that responded to the survey. Next slide. I was going to try to describe the fact that there are many respondents who represent homes with children, age preschool through 18, 19 years old. That graph isn't, you have to spend a little bit of time, and so when you look at it online after this is posted, it'll make a little bit more sense, but it was a reminder to us that getting to schools and young children, understanding how to walk and ride bikes is an important part for Middletown to consider going forward. Down at the bottom, we have the top mentions for the recreational areas, the parks, and they were in order of mentions in the response, going from Core Creek, Steyer, Middletown Community Park, and Play-Wiki, the top 4, and the top 3 areas for commercial and retail destinations. Oxford Valley Mall certainly topping it, and there was an understanding in the survey that Oxford Valley Mall is changing, right? But it was still listed as a very premier destination for the township. Next slide. Boiling it all down, that question that you see from the survey, what areas would you like to see improved ped bike access? And as you total them up, access to your neighbors, residential neighborhoods is tops, retail establishments, and then SEPTA Regional Rail as the top 3 as you went through the survey. And that makes a lot of sense. And that's really what Middletown is. There's so many great neighborhoods. Being able to safely get to ones where you abut is important to people. It's really, especially coming after the pandemic. I'd like to take just a quick moment here because SEPTA Regional Rail, having 2 rail stations that are in your township, is a very unusual thing in the SEPTA system. So the rail we talked about, and we met with SEPTA and got to understand from them the real issues that are happening at Woodbourne. I don't have to tell you how difficult those things are. We'll talk about them when we do the Woodbourne corridor. But we also had a meeting with SEPTA Bus. Harley Cooper is the director of planning for SEPTA bus routes. SEPTA buses are going through a big change, and I asked Steve Knoll if he would just speak just briefly about what Middletown can expect with the bus revolution, that's what SEPTA is calling it. Coming out of the pandemic, of course, and the fiscal responsibility they have, SEPTA is looking at how they can more efficiently run their buses, how they can run them faster, get the people to where they want to go, and make better use of the system that they've got. And that's going to mean changes to Middletown. So I asked Steve if he could just kind of talk to that just for a minute or two so that you folks are all up to date. And again, this will all be part of our report as well. Steve, thank you.
Certainly, thanks, Anita. The basics on the bus revolution, which SEPTA is terming for it's a radical redesign of its entire bus network across the entire region. And the bus revolution, I'll start by saying, so I don't forget to say it later, that if you want any information on the changes to SEPTA's bus routes to see what they're proposing in this area or anywhere else, they have a website, septabusrevolution.com. That you can check out. They have slider maps where you can see exactly right down to the neighborhood, right down to the house, what the changes are going to be in SEPTA service. Now, good or bad news, depending on how you look at it, is the changes in Middletown Township proper are relatively insignificant. SEPTA's fine-tuning routes, the Route 14, between Oxford Valley Mall and Frankfurt Transportation Center, just some route deviations that are being fine-tuned to provide a more direct, a quicker service. SEPTA Route 127 between Chamonix Mall and the Trenton Transit Center is being adjusted, again, to take out certain segments. Route 128 between Bensalem and Bristol by way of Tullytown, Croydon, and Bristol is being discontinued altogether. Now, notice that I say the route is being discontinued, service will remain. They're using what they call on-demand routes now. Another term used for it is microtransit. So basically, picture your basic bus route running along a line between points. And what this does is takes on-demand, meaning there's an app or a phone number where you'll actually call when you need the service. And it's on demand. There'll be buses in the area to take you where you need to go. But instead of running around that line between points, it operates within a polygon. So I said, just take that line of a standard bus route, make it fatter. And this bus can bounce back and forth inside this zone and then provide connections with other standard SEPTA routes. It can also provide connections with other microtransit zones. So that's what's going to be implemented along part of Route 127 that right now dips into the Levittown area and the entirety of Route 128. They're doing this elsewhere in the region as well, but that's the most significant change that's going to happen in terms of getting around. Some are nervous about it, but I'm telling you, don't be nervous about the idea of a microtransit route. This is actually more on demand. You can pick up, you can use your app, you can use your phone. Some compare it to Uber. I say that's not quite the way you want to look at it because it doesn't necessarily stop right at your door. It's a corner-to-corner service, but you can say, I'm at the corner of Avenue B and 1st Street, and I'd like to go, I need service, and then the bus will come and get you, and then you can make any connecting routes that you need to make. So that's the most significant part. That's, in summary, what's happening with the SEPTA routes at this point in time, and I'll turn it back to Anita.
Thank you, Steve. That's important for our study because, of course, knowing where the buses stop and where the trains are, of course, getting people to those places. We don't know quite how this microtransit, app-based, call for SEPTA is going to impact, where they will drop you off or pick you up, but we are assuming that it will have to be at an established sidewalk for safety reasons, right? So that was another concept that was important to this study. So thank you. Nick, next slide. These are the locations that people talked about the most in the survey, right? And so it really gave us a direction to find where those neighborhoods are and to put people where they want to be connected, connect, sidewalk gaps as necessary, and really look at those roads on the right to make sure that we can provide those connections for people safely. Next slide, Nick. What other issues came out? So as we poured through those 287 responses, the comments in the boxes are sort of things that people wanted to tell us in the survey. Aside from get me from A to B, they wanted to know that, SEPTA, we need quality stops, right? That is not part of this study, but it certainly will be passed on to Harley Cooper at SEPTA as well. Concern about speed and traffic, of course, is pretty normal for all of us who are experiencing this real boom in development and multi-residential changes to the mall. Maintenance of the streets and sidewalks in the neighborhood areas, people concerned about parked cars that block the sidewalks. That was quite a few comments that were about that. And then the blue box in the upper right is really how do we get out of Middletown and take advantage of some things that are really in our region. So we were cognizant of all of those. Again, some out of scope, but we did the best we could with those. Here's an online picture of the amount of results that we got. So people, not only 287 people wrote down their answers to the survey, but they actually jumped on that nice tool, Wikimap, and 223 comments were posted. Those are the 8 categories that we gave them. You could pick any of those. You could also write memos or take pictures, whatever you wanted to do. But I highlighted that the highest totals of what people added to that map were desires for sidewalks, filling in gaps or adding them to the existing network, or letting us know with those big orange X's what were the challenging areas, what were the challenges people felt unsafe, why they wouldn't consider going to this area because they felt unsafe about it. So that was our results from Wiki Mapping. Great, because we have that right in front of us as we're looking at as we're driving through the township or as we're looking at Google to really understand why they are challenging areas. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Creary, who has just been amazing in his diligence to Middletown. and making this the best that it possibly can be. So I really laud him for the amount of time and the interest he's taken and creativity. So he'll take us through the plan, and we'll take whatever questions you have on the plan, certainly. I'd like to see if we could wait till the end of the presentation, but after Jeff speaks, if there's someone who wants to speak directly, please go right ahead.
So this is the plan. This is the draft plan. This is by no means the final plan. When we say we have a 30-day review period, we're talking about reviewing this plan. And what this plan is a series of toolbox items that we discussed earlier. Things like sidewalks, we have bike lanes, everything you could possibly want. And what we tried to do is to connect to all the communities. In fact, we did it. We took all the sidewalk gaps that were out there and we started connecting them so people could get to other places. Now, we did not want to put sidewalks in every single gap. That price tag would just go through the roof, and that's what we wanted to avoid. We just don't want to go and say, oh, they don't have a sidewalk on this street, let's put one there. No, we looked at where the destinations were, and that's really what this is. So it's a very complex plan, and there's a lot going on in that plan. So what we did is we broke it up into tiles. These tiles that you see, these 6 tiles, are going to be in the report. And as you can see, we're going to take a quick look at the sheet number 4 in the report. And that's what it looks like. It's an 11 by 17. You can go in there and you can see where your neighborhoods are. You can see where the existing sidewalks are. You can see where a proposed bike lane may be, or sharrows, where the traffic lights are. So you can go in and review this. You have 30 days. We welcome more input. If people feel really strongly about getting a sidewalk somewhere, please let us know. We've been saying this from the very beginning. We truly care about what you have to say. All residents, we welcome any tiny bits of detail because this isn't our plan, this is the residents' plan. And we really want this to make this the best plan we can for the residents of Middletown. So right now, I'm going to throw it back to Anita, and she's going to take us into the next section.
So much. I think when you look at the map, it doesn't look like there's that much detail, right? This is a first planning effort in this area. And looking at it, and it will be refined, and we're going to make a pitch to the Planning Commission that they look at this yearly, right? Things are going to change, things are going to be built. You know, maybe there's some things that need to be added, so we're going to recommend that certainly that the Planning Commission take ownership of this plan so that it's updated. But very clearly, as we said, there are 2 areas that people talked about. And looking at the geography, if we could just go back to the full slide. Yeah, thank one more, Nick, if you don't mind. Let's see, is it the full, whoops, that's going forward. If we could go backwards. So you can see the whole township, and one more, right? So looking at that, there's certainly a north to south portion of the township, and there certainly is an east-west, right, to the township, with the donut hole is what we call your neighbors in the borough, right? So looking at the Woodbourne corridor and Route 1, they really represented to us, especially Woodbourne Road, that area of getting from the southern part of the township to the northern. So Woodbourne became a focus for us, as did Business Route 1. So if we could advance it just a little bit, Nick, to where I said additional investigation, that slide. Right, so we go to the next one. At which point, I'm going to turn this over virtually, if I could, Nick, to Lori Ware, who is, Dawood Engineering is on our team. And again, part of the project budget was specifically set aside for, as we understood where the biggest challenges were, we wanted to look at them in a little bit more detail to set the township up for how they'd like to approach these most challenging areas. So for that being the case, Lori, I'll just talk about what the goals are. What is that advanced, look? And that is, a little bit more data gathering about how the proposed toolbox items can fit, how much right-of-way we have to do some of these improvements, what are the affected parcels, some big things about Woodbourne that I'll let Lori talk about, tunnels, What are the design considerations and constructability issues? These are the things that will help the Planning Commission and the township supervisors decide how to approach the improvements in this very important corridor. So, Lori, I'll turn it over to you if I could.
Thank you very much. I did try and start a video, so forgive me for being a random voice in space. We did, as Anita talked about, we did go through Woodbourne corridor. I'm not going to reiterate what she said. We'll just kind of go into the details. So if you could advance to the next slide, that would be helpful. This is the other corridor that we focused on based on the feedback that we received from everybody in the township. Again, we will go over this in future slides. It will be kind of more addressed. But this is the existing conditions that we reviewed and how to essentially improve them for connectability, walkability, bikeability, everything you can think of. If you can go to the next slide, that'd be helpful. So in this case, the first focus, of course, is the accessibility to the Woodbourne train station. Obviously, there are some limitations as you're approaching the Woodbourne station. The tunnel that's right there that you can see in the middle picture is one of them. There is not necessarily ease of walkability to it. Also, when you have head crossings of the train tracks themselves, and then the fact that there's also vehicular traffic all in this minor area can cause a little bit of confusion, a little bit of concerns for safety for someone actually trying to access train station, and then from the train station to get to all the wonderful facilities that you guys have in your municipality. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in reviewing this corridor with Woodbourne, we did focus on 4 particular areas, not to say that we didn't continue it all the way to the township line, but these are the 4 locations in particular. One of which there's, of the 4, they are placed sporadically. 2 of them are related to overpasses and tunnels. One is just connectivity, and then one is an actual signalized intersection. And we'll go into those in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. So for the first option, there is a very small, but very historic and very beautiful wood tunnel that you have with train tracks over top of it. Obviously, unfortunately, with the limitations of height, with restrictions, trying to have any sort of sidewalk as an option here, in addition to trying to have vehicles come through there, is a little bit of an issue. So the couple of options that we have, at least that are obviously a little bit further out, but they are actually providing a separate pedestrian tunnel is one of them, and that tunnel can actually, we show it on the eastern side, but it can also be on the western side. We are exploring the options with regard to accessibility on both sides of the tunnel and with utilities, railroad itself, to explore which side would be beneficial. The other option is to widen the tunnel itself. Obviously, that would widen it for vehicular and pedestrian traffic. That's a quick rendering that we have in the option 2. Obviously, we did try and explore if there were opportunities to use the existing tunnel. The issue is just the restrictions that are there and the actual safety that we want to have for bikes and peds to make sure that they can navigate that without having fear of the vehicles coming through there. Next slide, please. The second location was the tunnel that is adjacent to the train station. Again, we did explore the option of pedestrian tunnels. We do know that they are a larger ticket item. So obviously we tried exploring different options as well. Another one is, if you look at the image that is in the upper left side, obviously with a 5-foot shoulder, not the safest, but there are options if we try and push traffic a little bit closer to the one side, if we have opportunities to unfortunately reduce the width, but maybe reduce it for a small distance so that we can still have accessibility on both sides without this large ticket pedestrian tunnel that would be beautiful, but may or may not be in the adjacent budget that you guys are working on. Next slide, please. Thank you. The other, providing accessibility as we're looking to put in sidewalk along West Woodbourne to provide all that connectivity and accessibility, was the overpass over top of 295. Obviously, it's a very wide bridge, but it did not have any pedestrian accessibility on it. One of the simple options that would be low cost but efficient would be actually adding these delineators across. Obviously, they're not ideal for snow removal. However, if you use delineators versus actual barrier or barrels, they actually can be removed. So there are options. There's also different retrofit curbs that you can put that's a little bit more permanent. But if you do that in addition to actually providing pavement markings, you can do that as a low cost improvement. The other option, of course, that would provide a little bit more safety is to actually explore the bridge structure itself to see if a sidewalk can be fit on that shoulder area. It would be at a different level grade, so obviously that would provide that level of comfort that I know pedestrians and bikes would probably look for. Next slide, please. The other is, as we're looking to provide sidewalk along Woodbourne, primarily it would be on the western side of Woodbourne. However, there is a section that we would provide on the eastern side. That eastern side would connect 4th Street to actually 213 or Route 1 as it goes down, moving further south. The reason for that is actually there's a large hill and grade issues. It also looks like there might be utility issues with utility poles on that western side for that section of it. The easiest crossing point, or the most that provides the safety, is actually at a signalized intersection. So utilizing 4th Street would be ideal. Obviously, we are still exploring the option of pedestrian refuge islands if they are feasible, but in this case, you can see the direction of travel to and from that train station at Woodbourne. Next slide, please. And this just gives you kind of a representation of what it would be. Nice, beautiful walkway for all the residents to use going north and south. It also does provide connectivity for all of the neighborhoods of residential areas that are along here to possibly add more to their walking paths and walking travels. Next slide, please. Thank you. As for the second corridor, this is Route 1. Obviously, this has a massive amount of commercial traffic that's on it. And there's also the pedestrian generators is what we call them, where there's restaurants and retail, commercial, just pedestrian gathering. There's also, I know, bus routes that are along here. The biggest concern, of course, is that there's not necessarily walkability that is through here. There's some pieces of sidewalk where we'd like to connect them to be able to provide access to Oxford Valley Mall. And the intent of walking along Business Route 1 corridor, is also to then provide the connectivity to Woodbourne, which then would provide access to those northern areas, that train station. It also provides access to Oxford Valley Mall. We know they're in the process of renovating that and changing that. I know we're not 100% as to what's going in there, but they are, at least that would provide a good destination point for it. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the two critical points of this corridor are, obviously, there's one area where there is what we call a crossover, where it does intersect at an angle with two one-way movements. I'm sure you guys on this call would be familiar with it. The other is there are drainage structures and there's a bridge structure that would provide a little bit of problems for the connectivity. And I'll focus on those in the next two slides. Next. Thank you. So you can see originally we did want to provide connectivity through that crossover. It does provide a little bit more of a direct connection if you are trying to get to the southern side of Lincoln Highway. As previously proposed, we did try and do the sidewalk that was parallel to it. Unfortunately, looking at it, there are some safety concerns, and they also were raised safety concerns in the last meeting that we had. So, in deference to all of those safety concerns, we did explore other options, and the option was to push the sidewalk another block south, so to speak, so that it actually ran parallel to Lincoln Highway and did avoid that crossover. In doing so, we do cross a little bit more of the driveways, but we do feel like obviously that addresses some of the concerns that everybody would have for safety. Lastly, as we're walking along Route 1, there are these two structures that is an issue. The one on the left is an existing drainage feature for the bridge that's underneath it. Obviously, we could push the sidewalk around it. It's not ideal because of the 88 grade changes that we know it's going to be. We can talk to PennDOT, and we're in the process of it, to try and explore what actually that is and what options we could have. The other was explored to maybe utilize the street in this case. Obviously, that's not ideal and not safe. And as you can see from this picture, prime example is people do use that as an acceleration lane to gain access to Lincoln Highway. So we really don't want to introduce that conflict area. Similarly, there is a bridge structure that has a large opening and an elevation change where if we were to provide connectivity on that side of eastbound Route 1, the best solution would be a pedestrian bridge. Obviously, we did again explore the option of trying to use the lane, but again, we have noted that there is an acceleration lane that they would use because there is an exit that's right here, right off the image, that we would be afraid would cause conflict. So we would not want to introduce those ideas. And I'm going to kick that back to Anita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lori. So you showed us all these expensive things in Woodbourne, Lori, and in Business Route 1. So now I get to be the bearers of good news and bad news. But before we actually talk about the costs and how we arrived at them, I wanted to talk about, the whole issue of how are we going to pay for this, right? These are, when I get into it and when you get a chance to read the report, all of these estimates were based on a unit cost for the tools that Jeff had proposed. Sidewalks, right, sharrows, right? So we apply unit costs to get a cost estimate. But just to throw this idea out to you, the lineal foot cost for a 5-foot sidewalk is about $120. So you saw all those lines on the map, and I'm sure you can start to do the math on that, right? So this is not a cheap undertaking. It's incredibly important for the quality of life, and you've all mentioned that. So I preface all of these costs by those comments, but I also say, there are many options of how the township can approach these large ticket items, right? First of all, it's not, this plan is not going to be done in 5 years, right? This is 10 years, 15 years, 20-year commitment, right, to the types of improvements that we're talking about. The township is always very forward-thinking, and part of their yearly capital budget addresses certain aspects of, pedestrian connectivity. The costs of all these improvements do not have to be borne alone by the township, right? The second option here is grant funding from all of our partners. Middletown does not exist in a vacuum. It is part of a very influential county, in a state, in the federal government. Lately, the funding for multimodal safety improvements is incredibly rich. This next 5-year under the infrastructure bill, funding for the kinds of things that Middletown is embarking on is there. There will always be required a match. For instance, to apply for $1 million from some entity, they generally are asking for a 20% match from the township. That can be in the order of cash. It can be in the order of services, right? There's different ways of doing that match. And there's always costs associated with administering the grants. So grants are great, great opportunities, and your township is amazing in what they go after to be able to foot the bill for some of these improvements. This study being one of them, right? So they got a grant to actually pay for this study. The third option, the costs that can be assumed during the redevelopment process, getting developers to share in the costs of these very important improvements that improve the quality of their developments as well as the quality of life for the people in the township. The township has an Act 209 plan, which actually has assigned traffic impact fees for every development that generates a trip, right? So if you are putting in a multifamily apartment building, the traffic engineer determines how many trips, and there is a fee for that. Those are monies that the township can use to do traffic improvements in those areas. The township also has other options to place certain improvements on an official map that the township may want to consider in the future that says, hey, if you're a developer coming in, this entire Woodbourne corridor is an incredibly important part of our township, and we are asking you to finance the improvements that affect your development as you come in here. So there's ways of paying for all of this, and there's mix and match, of all of these options to accomplish that. So I say that before we start talking about the costs. Next slide, Nick. How did we do it? Well, we took the township, the map that Jeff had generated, and divided it into 12 areas. So if you can look closely, that Woodbourne and Route 1 corridor becomes Area 2. So all of the improvements on the map were divided into those 12 areas, and we kind of strategically did that to make sense for planning purposes. So you can kind of see 1, 2, 3, and 4, 2 being kind of the north-south route, and then we have 10, which is Trenton Road, and we have 7 over there to the west, that corridor that's coming out, 213. So we're hoping that it makes sense from a planning point of view. So we took all of the improvements, broke them out area by area. When you look at the report, each area will be delineated with a toolbox description, what the item is, a sidewalk, a crosswalk, where it is, how long it is, the unit cost. You can kind of see where I got that $127.44 for the lineal foot of sidewalk for a total cost in that area. Just a reminder, these are construction costs, right? There's a little bit more that I'm going to go through for these improvements that we have to consider besides just improvement construction costs. So 12 areas, all detailed out. Next slide. Just to blow up, here's Area 3. So you'll see of the improvements, all of the legends that you're going to look at on the map. We had sidewalks, we had side paths, which are 10-foot wide asphalt paths. Multimodal trail is also 10-foot wide, not necessarily next to a roadway. Side paths are generally associated right next to a roadway. A rapid flashing beacon, again, a very high safety tool used across people. Speed tables, where we're generally saying we need to slow people down and put in speed bumps or speed tables. All of them are costed out there for Area 3. That's how we get the $1.8 million for Area 3. Certainly. Yes, yes. The lengths of them, is that what you're talking about? So the question for the audience was, do we have the actual lengths of all of the tools that I'm showing on this slide? And the answer is yes. That is going to be in the report. So the previous slide showed you that the tabulation of what you see on the plan is actually what those costs represent. Yes. Mm-hmm. Sure. Correct. Sidewalks, what we have described as sidewalks, are 5-foot wide concrete sidewalks at $125 a lineal foot. Correct. Side path, 10-foot wide asphalt, 8 to 10, I'm sorry, 8 to 10, but intended, right, for both, the width for bikers and walkers. Correct, but always the side, that we use the word side path to let you know that it's next to a cartway, a roadway, versus a multimodal trail, 8 to 10 feet, that you'll see on the plan, goes through areas off-road to try to connect parks or backs of neighborhoods where we think that could be. Asphalt, right? Or it could be either. It could be either. We have costed it most expensively as an asphalt. And the reason we do is an asphalt trail is much easier to maintain. Gravel and, wood chips, as lovely and natural as that sounds, they wash out. They're difficult to kind of keep in good shape. So everything we've costed has been asphalt for the side paths and the multimodal trails. Side paths, because side paths are done, you'll see in the cost estimate, we give a lineal foot, but we actually convert it to square yards, and the cost is associated with the square yards. You can do it either way, but because, to your point, they could go from 8 foot to 10 foot, doing it by lineal foot isn't apples to apples, right? Mm-hmm. I see. Point noted. Good, thank you. So that's the basis of this, but right, when we get down to the next phase in deciding if this is in fact what we want to do, is it going to be concrete? Is it going to be asphalt? That's going to be a decision that the township and the township engineers will do, so. Right, understood. Great, no, sure. Next slide. So there's the summary of the area. So area 3, we just did, and if you saw, it was 1.8 million. So look at the first line under area 3. You'll see that is the proposed improvements. If you looked just at area 3, there's more to just the improvement, right? We need a contractor who is going to mobilize. First, it's got to be designed, surveyed and designed. The contractor is going to be building it in a year to the future. There's contingencies that will be part of his bid. So the 1.8 becomes 2.4 with the standard application of design, survey, construction contingency, erosion and sediment control, stormwater management, all of those things. So you can kind of see we took the improvements and then applied a certain percentage of those that you could expect for all of those other items to come up with a total number to design, construct, and implement all of those improvements. So here's a graphic of the first 4 areas. Area 2 is the one that is going to be the last to be costed because of the coordination that we're doing with Lori and the potential for big ticket items that you saw pictures of in Area 2. So we're going to do a good job of trying to explain, represent the costs for Area 2, which are aspirational, absolutely. But they represent, we think, life-changing things that you have all suffered through in that Woodbourne corridor for years now. So we're gonna make a stand. We're gonna make a stand and start. Next slide. And here's your 5 to 8 area. Same thing. We go from 3 million, down to $500,000. Area 7. Next slide. And the last 3, right? So Trenton Road down to New Falls Road in those 3 areas. So next slide, Nick. So there's our grand total of 12 areas without considering tunnels, which are huge ticket items. So this is not, there will be a way that we will explain it. This is all of the improvements except for some of the big things that we will want to explain about. But 27 million, I just noticed the $1 at the end there, so that's kind of, kind of gives us something to smile about, 27 million, and then $41 at the end. Again, important investments and a starting point for the township going forward. Next slide. I'm going to pass this over now back to Bill to kind of close us out before we all talk about the plan and answer any more of your questions about it and implementation. So.
Thank you, Anita. So we have a 30-day review period for everyone to go online and read this and make comments. The report will be transmitted by our team to the stakeholders who've been involved, to the key persons who've been interviewed. That 30-day public comment period will start from tomorrow, is it? Or okay. All right. Okay, it's posted tomorrow, and It'll be 30 days or more from tomorrow, and that'll be online, that information. Our team does have a presentation scheduled on November 1st to the Township Planning Commission, and our presentation to the Board of Supervisors is on December 11th. After we get their comments, then we'll go to the final publication. And so I think one of the things that I just want to reemphasize, which Anita was talking about, is the opportunities for partnership. Middletown Township has been really terrific at pursuing and securing different grant funds. And so there are county, federal, state, and nonprofit organizations that help fund different aspects of these kinds of projects. And so some of them can match each other. Some of them can be matched by developer contributions. Sometimes the townships or municipalities kick in to match. What's in the final plan is a general strategy for how to go about monies and which of these improvements qualify under each category. So it's not like we can say today what's going to happen in the next 10 years, but it is a palette of opportunities where leadership at the township and public comment can help guide the decision from year to year, what becomes the priority, and match that with the monies that are available that year. So that's the way these projects are funded and strategized. With that, I'd just like to, oh, there are, okay. This one's on, oh, this is a sample? Right. This is a sample of how Jeff constructed the project. So it's a sample of the graphics and how the narrative is presented. Next. Other draft report pages, you can see we focused on it being very graphic, giving examples and photographs, and really spending a great effort on the mapping so that it's clear and you can zero in on your neighborhood or places of concern. Next. And again, this is the team with our contact information. And so with that, let's open it up to questions and comments. Okay. Yeah, okay. And if you, sir, come up to the microphone and we'll turn that on.
Do you need my name? Okay. Well, anyway, my name is Tom Piacentino. I'm a member of the Planning Commission. So I'll see you guys on the 1st of November. So a couple things. I got here late today, unfortunately. One of the things that I was shooting for was the path along, some kind of path along Foley Mill and Tollgate. So I live on the north side of Core Creek Park, between there and the bypass. And there's a ton of people that come down my street and then use Foley Mill, and then they go to Tollgate to get to the park. I mean, bicycles, runners, walkers, it's almost all day long. There's no shoulders. Part of Foley Mill has a guardrail, which is about this wide. So, you know, you're fighting against not only no room, but people that don't want to give up in the cars that don't want to give you the space. And now there seems to be a problem all along these roads and Ellis and all, where these people, and I myself use, they don't even maintain the sides of the roads anymore. So the weeds and stuff are growing out on the roads. So I don't know if that can be taken care of at this point, or I'm going to bring it up to the township in another direction. I know it's county also, but they're not even cutting along the roads. So now you have, even the people driving on the road have to avoid this stuff because it's growing out onto the roads itself. The tunnel, I guess that was point number 2 that goes through, you're talking about by Woodburn Road and Wood Lane. I think the right side would be terrible. I think the left side would be a lot better because two reasons. A, you got Steyer's on the left side when you get on the other side. And B, they just built a brand new facility on the right side for the town, for the Bridge Commission.
Yeah, if I could speak to that.
Yeah,
real-
I understand. That's just a picture and that's a concept. So they were saying maybe instead of the right, the
One-
left
one
side.
second.
Yeah.
We agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah, so we agree. We were just playing with ideas, but in the plan itself, you will see that it is very much represented on that side. And the reason why we did that, after further research, we saw that that's where the floodplain was. It wasn't. It just created another crossing, and it would be a lot better, more enjoyable, and just overall a better access point if you could access up to Stires that way. So we're with you 100%. As for the sidewalks, we noted it. We are going to not add it tomorrow because we're not in the office tomorrow. But come Monday, we are going to probably put it in there. We'll make sure and verify that would work in the plan, and we can get that in there. As for maintenance, maintenance is definitely an issue. We hear it every single project that we are in. Maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. And it's really tough to find funding for maintenance. While we definitely agree that that can be tough, this type of project doesn't address that, but I did see Nick taking notes over there, so I'm sure with your connections with the township that it will be, hopefully spoken about within the township.
And this is just this year now. I mean, for years they took care of it. It's been taken care of for the most part. I mean, best they can. I understand they can't go. Unfortunately, they used to spray, and luckily they got away from that. So, so anyway, I don't understand that situation. So the last thing, number 4 on the Woodburn. So there's an empty building on that corner. Capitol Health came in front of our, where you want to do the crossing and put the sidewalk in on the other side, on the mall side of Woodburn Road. So Capitol Health came in and wanted to take over that building there on the corner of 4th and Woodburn. And one of the things that we wanted them to do was to build that sidewalk. And they seemed to balk at it. I think PennDOT also wanted them to have a sidewalk along there so that they could use as part of them getting approved. So I think that's something that could hopefully help out if they ever do come through. They did some work on the building and then they stopped. I believe they stopped because of the price tag of the sidewalk. I don't know that for a fact, but just guessing, But I mean, there was a plan that somebody came in and wanted to do that, and Nick knows this. Anybody that comes in front of us anymore, we're telling them we want sidewalks because unfortunately for many years they took fee in lieu of, and then money went to wherever, and now we're finding out, hey, we need the sidewalks, and we will continue to push for that as long as I'm on the board, and so thank you for all your time, and we'll see you in a month.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry, I didn't get your first name.
Tom.
Tom, thank you. Tom, that Capitol Health plan, that wasn't recent, or that was recent?
It was 2 years ago,
2 years ago.
maybe.
Okay.
It was
Got
before
it.
they started building. I mean, it was after they decided about doing the apartments at the mall.
Okay.
But
Got it.
they did come in and they talked about it, and they actually did some work on the building, and then they stopped.
I see.
So I don't know if they decided they didn't want to do it after all, or they didn't like the price tag
Right.
of what the improvements were going to be
Right.
once they started looking into it.
Yeah.
And they came in with a conceptual plan,
Right.
and
Right.
So-
Great. And Tom, could I just go back to that issue about the tunnel, at Wood and Woodbourne? And Lori, I'm sure you're still listening in as well. As you can tell by us even drawing those pictures of tunnels, right? We're not afraid to dream big, right, and all of that. And so looking at that tunnel, of course, we know what the restriction is. We know what your life is like when trains are going through it. Everything is clogged up there. It's amazing.
School
really.
buses, trucks
Oh my
going through that
gosh,
tunnel
yeah.
all the
It's
time,
just
yeah.
been once or twice that we've been in the township and been affected by it. So anyway, we're slightly feeling your pain. But showing that tunnel on both sides, I mean, the more we started going up higher and thinking about that whole area, as Jeff said, we agree, initially it makes much more sense to come over, and that's the way the plan is drawn, and go on the west, go directly into Stires. But what if you did really think about that whole area as it possibly could redevelop, and what those, what would possibly, are there other reasons, is what I'm saying. And this is something that, as the township plans for it, and with the consultants, maybe there's other reasons why a tunnel on the other side could work for other reasons if different areas are rethought of and redeveloped. So looking at it and knowing that if you even consider a tunnel under an active rail line, it's got to be the most multimodally used for vehicles, for peds, for bikes, for all of that. So what we're saying is that this is our first look, and let's start putting the pen to paper with Dawood's help so that, yeah, we look at it in both ways. So dream big, we've got to, right?
Right.
So,
Well, I can tell you one thing. If you put a pedestrian tunnel in there, people are going to be clamoring as to why you're not making the car tunnel
bigger.
bigger to also at that same time.
That's right.
I mean, that's the number one thing we run into on the planning commission. The first thing most people ask us about is traffic.
Right.
We get hammered with it all the time, and we're not even the one with the final say. We're just there to try to clean the plans up and that kind of
Right.
stuff, you know.
We were really good at moving lots of cars as quickly as we can, or trying to,
Right.
and forgetting about the rest, and we're all
Right.
paying the price. Thank you for your service to the township, Tom.
Thank you. You're
Appreciate it.
welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Is there any other comments from the audience? Betty Ann and I spoke. Betty Ann, I've got your comment. We'll absolutely look at that area again as well. Comments? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Charles Bozzo, and I'm here from Falls Township as a bicycle advocate. I am one of those people who actually ride from point A to point B, just for the sheer enjoyment of using my bike. A couple of key things that I picked up on your presentation so far, and one of the things that I was glad to hear was the use of the word connectivity. One of the reasons I'm here tonight is to bring the thoughts to foremind on connectivity to your neighboring townships. Trenton Road is a big key component, I believe, to that, because for a number of reasons, all of which I might not be talking about here. But one of them has to be the friendliness and the access that's already built into the wide berth on most of Trenton Road. As far as the Route 1 corridor, it's great to be able to bring the bicycling community to the business community. It works both ways for everybody and a benefit. One of the things I'm working on is trying to get another loop created by way of the Delaware Canal State Park, and that would include another bridge concern. That's Tyburn Road and Route 1 in Falls Township. It divides Pennsbury School District in half. It divides Falls Township in half, not too unlike the bridge that you're concerned with on Woodburn Road. So we share commonality. Trenton Road is access for a loop to be created off the Delaware Canal State Park, which, by the way, they do promote the state park and the use of loops for one-time parking of your vehicle and going for a bike ride and being able to get back to where you started. They promote the canal 4/5 of the way there. There's no promotion of loop use below Route 1. And so I think we're giving ourselves a deficit by not utilizing that realm of tourism. Opening up Trenton Road will bring Morrisville to Bensalem closer together. It'll bring 3 to 4 school districts closer together. I'm on the wellness committee at Pennsbury School District. I just had to finish a meeting with them before I came here. My goal in that is to bring scholastic cycling and to promote cycling education among our younger residents. Because when our younger residents get to be my age and they still have to look at some of these things that I had to grow up with and still struggle, they're going to be upset with us, okay? You might ask me the question as to why I don't ride too much in Middletown Township. Well, I do. And my main goal right now is to try to find safe route access across Route 1. I don't believe that the internet is the only thing that may have hurt them all. I believe that accessibility also hurt them all. Knowing the history of the Levittown Shopping Center in Tullytown Borough, which I grew up with and around, I think that's a testament to exactly that, because they're getting traffic down there, both pedestrian, cycling, and vehicular. If we look at my latest analogy of what my attempts are to do with communicating with people where I don't know what you know and you may not know what I know, I can tell you that my information and my experiences are firsthand and they're 40 years old. I just recently have been able to find verification of some of these thoughts and ideas with the advent of social networking. If I can point your attention to a group called Strong Towns, written by, it's a group that's on YouTube right now, but the author is Chuck Marone. Chuck is a retired engineer. He wrote a book called Confessions of a Retired Engineer. He's the type of person that would actually take a look at these plans and tell you whether or not you're going to get an estimated value on your return on your investment. Okay? I noticed that we had a sidewalk showing it going up and down one side of Route 1. Concrete sidewalk, which very few people want to walk along Route 1. My best example there would be Bristol Township's new sidewalk on New Falls Road. Please, please don't do that. He'll talk to you about things like scaling. And in the Levittown, lower Bucks County suburbs, the proper scaling for being able to go from point A to point B is more and more pointing toward bicycles and human-powered vehicles. That would include electric assist vehicles and scooters. So my bigger goals are, with the weather to climate analogy, is I'm kind of like the climate guy. I would like to know if your plan is going to incorporate things like the use of color green for a designation. I think that's pretty important since the city of Philadelphia is using green. You had mentioned signals and paint that people may not understand yet, but explaining a simple color can do the job. The other thing I'd like to do is promote the idea that we demote, or just wherever it's not necessary, eliminate the use of concrete sidewalks. They're less fair to anybody who is not a pedestrian. I'm thinking about anybody who is on a human-powered wheel. So that would incorporate skates, skateboards, scooters, and whatever else the future has to hold for the young people today. Because we're not here to dictate what they travel on. We're here to assist them in how to use their vehicles to get from point A to point B safely. And I'd like to expand that more by opening it up to an email and conversation with you guys over the next 30 days.
That would be wonderful. And your contact information, you had the sign in there?
Yes, it is.
Absolutely, we will.
Okay?
Yeah. And our contact information is on the agenda that's over there too, so please reach out. But we will probably be the ones that reach out first, so thank you. Thank you
Okay.
so much for your time.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Lorena. I'm actually one of the individuals on that pie chart of longevity of people who've lived in the area of the 0 to 5 years. I just bought a house last year. And I just noticed the flyer in August, so unfortunately I wasn't able to attend the first couple of meetings that were on this one, but I'm super excited when I saw that flyer, and so here I am. So a couple of questions, and I'm sorry if I didn't understand, but so the Middletown Township is divided into, what was it, 9 sheets? 12 sheets?
I'm sorry, actually, the sheets is 6 sheets.
Okay.
That'll
But
be in the report.
the majority of the presentation focused on sheet 4, right?
Not necessarily, just giving it as an example, Marina?
Yeah,
just
as an
because-
example.
Right, that was the example, just to see
Okay.
when it's actually printed, most people, I'm hoping, will look at it online and can enlarge it.
Yeah.
But each of those maps will be 11 by 17, and sheet 4 was right. the one
So
you-
that sheet 4 was just an example in terms of
Exactly.
what each one, and then your cost estimates include all of those different
Correct.
sheets.
So the 6 sheets represent 12 full areas.
Yeah.
Let's see, you can kind of see. Right.
Okay.
So you'll have to look at a full map to decide which area you're in, right? And that will help you guide, sort of the 6 maps that are part of the report, see
Yeah.
where you are, so.
So that you have the cost estimate for all of that, and my question is, with the number of cost, and given that you may not have the funding that you want, do you have certain areas prioritized that you would go for first? And any further thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Marina, and that is, prior to this public meeting, we met with the steering committee. So the steering committee and Nick are our guideposts, really, for this study. So all of the information that we're providing you, we've talked about with the steering committee, and we said the exact same thing to them. I mean, this is the township's plan, and we've set up the tools to give you a look at the entire township. What we decide to do first is going to be up to you. We, as Bill mentioned, will look at what we think the best funding opportunities are, and the township will review that within their own budget. But ultimately, we can make recommendations based on, we already said, Woodbourne and in Route 1 were the most frequently mentioned with dangerous and challenging and places people want to go. Does that automatically become the first priority? Maybe not. Maybe the best bang for the township's dollar, Marina, is to look at a funding program that allows us to do X, Y, and Z, and that becomes the first thing. So basically, we will set up a part of our report where we make recommendations on what funding could be available, and given that, how many areas of the township might be affected by that. But the ultimate decision will be certainly your voice with the township.
Would that be one of the next steps then, is to do that further analysis as to which would be a priority?
Yes,
or-
once you have this plan in hand, you will then decide where you want to go. Another thing we should really add into is the atmosphere right now for grant money is spectacular. There's so much money out there. And say you want to do something over to the eastern side of the township. Well, the western side actually has a school. It has another item. And it hits all these check boxes that could fit a grant. Well, all of a sudden, you're going to be able to get funding for it quickly if you're awarded that grant. We did something very similar with Radnor Township. Radnor Township, we had a trails plan throughout the whole township, but we saw an opportunity to utilize school property, access 2 SEPTA stations, connect downtown Wayne with a trail network, and that was a winner. And boy, did we get a lot of grants. We actually got 4 grants all together for millions, and it was able to fund that project at a very low cost to the township. So you really have to play the money, but also you have to get your neighbors together. If you want something, you got to let the township know. Let them know that you're passionate about it and the reasoning why. So there's just so many dynamic ways to get the money. It's tough to give one clean answer to it.
And sometimes those grants are tied to certain ways that you can use that money, for example, is what you're saying? Okay.
True, exactly. Some are related to, schools, special programs for safely getting kids to school. Marina, the one other thing I was going to say, and it just slipped my mind. Oh, man. Yeah,
No,
keep
okay,
going. Is it more
great.
so
Thank
we
you for
do?
the clarifications.
Yeah, okay, great.
Thank you.
And if I could just add to that too, the work that the consultants up here on the stage, and they've done a great job developing this plan. Their work is, nearly done. We hope to kind of continue bouncing ideas off of them in the future, but the work really begins on implementing the plan, and that's obviously the hardest part of this whole thing. And it's not something that happens overnight, but we have a handful of you here in the audience who clearly are dialed into this topic, and we don't want your interest in this topic to stop at the plan. Really, as we implement it and look for which areas do we want to begin making this investment in the community, and identifying what are the priorities of the neighbors, because ultimately you guys are going to be the ones who are utilizing these facilities primarily. And so we would certainly ask that you continue to advocate moving forward with primarily the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah. I have one more question. And so when you talk about, so the different, so you have your cost estimates for each of the different zones, or whichever the terminology you used. What would be really interesting to see now, I know that you only had about 200 responses to the public survey, but what would be interesting to see is what is the analysis broke down by each of those regions, and then you would be able to see perhaps it would help in that decision making on what is the biggest bang for your buck, for example, like what is your return on investment in terms of what do the individuals want in those communities, versus, what the cost may be. So for example, when I see some of those surveys, one of the highest priorities is access to park in neighborhoods. So if, for example, you were decided one reason or another you were going to prioritize the Woodbourne region, which was presented in more detail today, that doesn't necessarily meet the collective feedback of the community, right? So, yeah.
There's one other thing I wanted to talk about, the funding. I get your point. The survey wasn't designed at that aggregate, right? So it'll tell us who responded from inside the township and outside the township. But the public response every year to the township leaders is really important to do the part you're talking about. Tactically, if you want to get an idea of how this process works annually, you want to have your strategy done at the same time you're doing your budgeting every year, right? Because the next round of grants that come up start in February, hit big time April, May, June, and then there's some in September. And that's generally the way they work every year. You've got to have your strategy in place, and you've got to do your groundwork to be ready to hit those deadlines. So your communication efforts should be starting before the budgeting process is my suggestion. Right?
In speaking about priorities, one of our steering committee members said this, aside from making comments about the plans like you all tonight, maybe specific areas, but her comment was this: what are the areas that influence the most amount of population and get them to places that they want to go, the parks and the retail areas? So we could look at the township literally as a priority that way, you know, what gets the most amount of population to places that they want to go? Maybe that becomes the priority. So we are going to address that, you know, again, in the way we write the report. But I agree with Bill's the comments that, you know, each year a comment at the Board of Supervisors or the Planning Commission really helps focus that. So thank you for that. Anyone else to join us? Is there anybody online? Sure. I was just going to ask if anybody online. Nick, there wasn't? Okay. Go right ahead.
In following along with her concerns, one of the things they try to do with strong towns is motivate a community to learn to do small things while making big plans. In other words, there are things out there right now that can be done with minimal amount of expense.
Right.
And it can be started now. It's a way to get the community involved. It's a way to make them aware. They'll see groups out there working on things and ask why. And at the same time, your big plans can be made.
Right.
This is one of the reasons why I look at Trenton Road as a serious cyclist who uses the road every day and pretty much forgone Route 1 because I know it's a 10 or 15 year wish list,
Right.
right?
Right.
So.
And yet I also say I come from Chester County, and I'm sure my coworkers are tired of hearing me say this, but we literally had a traffic transportation connectivity issue. We're very close. We're right on the Chester Valley Trail, right? And an issue that was a problem for vehicular traffic, for pedestrian traffic, for people trying to access the trail. And we, kind of like we're doing with this plan, thought really big and put that idea on an official map of the township, and then had a perfect storm of what Nick said, where we had 3 developers come in the same area. And from the time we first floated the idea, it is literally being constructed now in our township 10 years later. So, I mean, shocking to me, because I served on my planning commission too, so I saw these issues day in. So the thought of what you just said, dreaming big, getting it down there, repeating it, right? You know, it's important, but doing the daily work that you're talking about is equally important. It's a passion for sure. So I totally agree with what you're saying.
That kind of spurred a comment that I have. On the path that I had drawn with the online tool to connect Christopher Jones Park to other areas, not just the ones that border 213 or adjacent on 213, but also off Brownsville Road and my road, which is Hollywood Avenue. I recommended that path be connected from Clearview into the park. If cost is a concern or a prohibitive factor in getting that project launched, maybe it could be done in baby steps. Right now, people have created a dirt hill to kind of get in. The township had white wooden like fencing, like a block into that park, which is so old it fell down. And then people that wanted access, where there really wasn't access, I think took the rest of it down. But what if that was just cleaned up? I mean, what if the debris and that old broken down fence was just cleaned up and some kind of earth digger just kind of leveled out that path where you only need about 3 feet to walk in. We certainly don't want dirt bikes in our backyard. But I would say with maybe just township crews, they could just give us a path to get into the park. And then the rest of it, whatever the plans are, could be put on hold until the money's available. And maybe there's other situations throughout the township that would fall in the same category.
Thanks, Betty Ann. Appreciate that. Great. And nothing online? I'll let you take us home then, Nick.
Sure, thank you. Thank you again, everybody, for coming out tonight. I know I see a lot of returning faces, so it's certainly good to have you guys back again. And I know that this is really an important topic for many of you. Please continue to be engaged with us. This is obviously kind of the last major real public-facing piece in kind of the development phase. And now we're getting through into the kind of the public review comment period. As we mentioned, probably early next week we'll have any small tweaks from tonight's conversation incorporated, and we'll be sharing that on the township website, social media, and just be on the lookout over the next couple of months as it makes its way through the Planning Commission in the month of November, and then to the Board of Supervisors we're looking at in the month of December. And please don't feel like those are your only 2 additional opportunities. You can certainly find my contact information. Again, my name is Nick on the township website. And then I believe the consultant's contact information is available on the agendas in the front of the room. So it's certainly continue to stay engaged with us. And thank you all for coming.